Hi, this is Kylie Koo. Welcome to my studio. So, you may have been expecting this video to have been up about, 14 hours ago. But, if you remember, Nina and I had decided to trial putting the video up on a Saturday evening UK time. But we've decided to revert back to Sunday morning at 8 AM UK time. Give it a good shot, but we've just decided to go back to the way it was before. Now, a lot of you in the group, in the Mixed Media Emporium group, have already given us positive feedback to that change. I know that for people in the Southern Hemisphere, it's perhaps not as convenient, and, I do apologise for that. But the one thing about YouTube videos is you can come and watch them at whatever time suits you. So, thanks for continuing to visit. So we are continuing with the April prompt of nature, and this week our challenge is insects, and I've got a project for you this week that I really hope you're going to enjoy. It's fun, it's unusual in some senses because you can get some results that you don't expect. There's a bit of having to just go with the process, to let go of any outcome that you might be expecting. So, if you're someone who likes to control things a lot, then, have a go at this and just kind of go with the flow, because this is the ideal project for this. Now, I'm using a particular paper today. You can use any type of paper with this at all. You can use any sort of paints or inks. I will go over in more detail each one as going along, but I did want to say a bit about the paper. Now, this is Kirkland, so from Costco, HP glossy photo paper. I think this is the paper that Nina uses when she's using her alcohol inks, and I think she said it's no longer available. But as far as I know, you could use any type of photograph paper for this, and you don't need photograph paper. The reason I'm using it is it's got a surface that will help me move the paint about a bit more. Now, I'll say more about that as I go along. But the art technique that I'm going to demonstrate today is called Decalcomania. You might know it better as blot art or ink blot art. But as an art technique, it was actually used by the likes of surrealist painters. So you might remember it from school, but it was actually used by surrealist painters such as Max Ernst. So it is a recognised technique within the art world. So on that note, I'm now going to switch over to editing mode. I just wanted to get those couple of points in to begin with. So I really do hope you enjoy this. As I say, you can use any paper, and I'll take you through the various supplies that I'm using as I go along, and I will, as far as possible, leave a list of everything that I've used in the description box below. If you're not a member of the Mixed Media Emporium and you'd like to join us in our Facebook group, then again, I'll leave a link to that before. There are 4 questions you need to answer to get into the group. They're not difficult questions, and one of them is simply agreeing to the group rules. Unfortunately, if you don't answer them, then, you automatically don't get in. It's just one of those things. But so take a moment or two to look at it and click all the, type in the answers, and then we're ready to go. So let's get started. Okay, don't know how, I missed to start the process here, but you will see it again later on. I took a sheet of the photo paper, this is an A4 size, and I folded it in half long ways down the middle. And I've got this watercolour paint palette set, just a recent one that I got, and it's called Graphitint by Derwent. So I was quite keen to try this out. So all I'm doing is I'm using a fair bit of water on my brush, picking some colour up from the paint, putting it down on one side, and then I fold the paper over and kind of smoosh it out. And you can do that with either your finger or with a bone folder. Now, this is watercolour, so if I want to try and retain a bit, so you'll see there's some nice dendritic prints going on. If I want to retain that, then what I'm doing is I'm drying it with the heat tool. just to try and set it, but any water that then goes on that will actually move it about again, so it's about just trying to be careful. There you'll see I've put the paint on both sides. You know, you can do it that way and then they just kind of smoosh in together. Now, I said at the start that with this process you've kind of got to let go of the end result, but what I'm trying to do here is to control it just a little bit, so it's not simply a case of putting one big blob of paint down and seeing what comes out of it. I am trying to place it to a certain extent to try and keep things within a kind of defined shape overall. Sometimes though, when I'm putting it down, I just don't know exactly what I'm going to get, and you'll see that as we go along. Now, I just use my fingers a lot to move the paint, and you'll see that that allows me to get a kind of rough circle, but I can also just use my thumb to move it up. You'll see I do that here, up and down if I want to extend that line, and also you'll see later as I move it to the side. Now there, that went out further than I expected it to, and that's where I said, you know, you have to let go of having a particular outcome, but I actually like the way that turned out. Just lifting a little stray blob there. Now, I'm loving this set of paints. I haven't swatched them yet, so I'm being careful not to mix them on top of each other as I sometimes end up doing, because I do want to swatch them. I'm not sure how they'll perform on ordinary watercolour paper, but I'll be testing that out soon. Just taking a smaller brush here, you know, just to put some finer detail in, just going down that middle bit. And what I'm very much trying to create today is just kind of, I was going to say mythical, but it's not based on any myths, but some kind of, this kind of one, to me, it's as if you were looking at small creatures, small insects, bugs under the microscope, and of course many of them are almost see-through, they're quite transparent, and this particular paint allows me to do that. And you'll see that I'm very carefully there using my thumb just to try and get little marks. Going back in, because it's watercolour, I can do that, adding a bit more water, and you'll see how that extended out further. So it really is a simple process. As I say, don't get too hung up on what you want to create at the end of the day, because the likelihood is you're not going to get that. But, you know, I've found a little bit of just being able to control it that little bit. Now, the reason I thought about this project for this week was I was sitting at my work table the other day. I spilled some paint on a piece of paper and I folded it over, and I thought, this is how I'll get some insects and butterflies for this week's project. So here I am. I'm now going to do the same using some Dr. P.H. Martin's inks. So just folding this one horizontally, again another sheet of A4 paper, and I'm going to put this on a bit faster because it's exactly the same process. Cherry red, sepia and aqua. Now let me say that this is one of these processes that if you enjoy doing it once, you might find yourself doing it lots, because it is almost quite addictive. You just don't know what you're going to get. So there, I folded it over. The ink wasn't fully smooshed out, wasn't fully distributed, so I just kept going back and doing a bit more. The one thing you need to be careful of is the paper not sticking together. So if you leave it, you know, folded over for too long, then there is a danger it will stick together. Now, sometimes you don't get the exact print on the other side. If that bothers you, just go back and add a bit more of the medium. Now, I went for the sepia because I thought this would go nice with the aqua. In hindsight, I'm not sure I would have added the cherry red, but I wanted something bright. This is the type of project where if you like muted colours, you could do it all muted. If you like bright, you can go all bright. Now here I'm just trying again to control it a little bit, just by trying to get a kind of basic shape of a kind of, I think it ends up more moth-like than butterfly-like, but you can see sometimes adding blobs, sometimes adding lines, and that's starting to take shape now. So looking now at that kind of centre part of the body. Now I've obviously got a few gaps in there, and I'm thinking about, well, how will I fill them? You don't have to fill them, it's okay for white to be shining through, but you know, I am looking at this as something that I would like to see through to a finished piece as possible. So adding bits in, trying to get shape, trying to get colour, mainly using my fingers, but as I say, you can use a bone folder or a plastic card to kind of get the shape. If you're at the kind of outside edge and you just need to be careful, I suppose, not to push the medium further out the way or it'll spill off the page. That's okay if that's what you like. Looking at that, moving that up and down to see which side I like best. But if you want to keep it on the page, then pull it in towards the centre rather than pushing it out the way. So I've got a smaller piece now, A5 size, and I'm now going to use these Pebeo Dyna paints. Starting off with this transparent, I think it's violet. Again, I'll leave all the names down below. And I'm just going to set these out in a moment. I've just put it onto a piece of the paper that I'd cut off when I was cutting ATC size. So I like to start down the centre just to get that central line in, but you can start anywhere on the page. So I've got my 4 colours there. And this one at the moment it's looking quite bright. You see I just added a bit more water there because it was a bit of a blob, but right away you can start to see the shape of an insect or a butterfly or a moth. And of course sometimes when you do this you see entirely different things. You know, if I didn't start in the middle every time and got that kind of body there, then you can end up with something that looks like an elephant or a zebra or whatever. Now those paints are drying quite quickly, and that kind of blue-black one was quite interesting because it actually almost starts to break up on the page. You can see little bits of dark in it. So there's something just about the way that it's reacting with the paper. And I'm actually liking the kind of overall shape of this one. And I guess the thing with this is, at what point do you stop and what point do you keep going? And there's no right or wrong reason. If you get it to a point where you really like it, then that's probably the time to stop. Otherwise, you know, you can go on and you overwork it. But you know what? It's one of those things. I think the other thing about this is it's very much about experimenting. You know, experiment with different papers, with different medium, and just see where it takes you. Some things will work out, other things won't work out quite as well. So I just dabbed up some excess there. There I was just showing that that blue-black is actually starting to split, even just sitting on that little bit of paper there. So here I am, again trying to control it that little bit in terms of where I'm putting some of the colour, but don't quite know how it's going to spread out, and it depends on how much water is added to it. The more water added, the further it will spread. And as much as, you know, I say just go with the flow, and you know, I'm definitely trying to create something from it, but at the same time never quite knowing how it's going to turn out. Looking at this from the sense of just getting a reasonable composition, getting a balance of colours, even although I'm using, especially with the ink one, using colours that perhaps weren't the best to go with each other. Again, it's all about experimenting. I will always say experiment because, well, it's the old story. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same results all the time. So experiment, and you might just find something that you suddenly think, wow, didn't know that would happen, and I like it. Now, if you didn't want to have that central line down there, what you can do is you can do it more like monoprinting. Put some paint down onto one sheet of paper, take another sheet of paper and spread the paint or the ink out that way. You know, you can smoosh it that way. So it's a bit more like monoprinting. So in a sense, this almost picks up some other techniques we've looked at in the past, monoprinting and dendritics. And, you know, it kind of combines it all into one here. And of course, my creations today are very abstract. These are not based on real butterflies or insects, but that's half the fun. Now I've come back to this one. I was not keen on the way that was looking at all. So I'm adding in a couple of more inks. One is Dyke Brown and this one is a Terra Cotta. The Dyke Brown, since I got it, and I've had it a few years, I don't know, it's had little bits in it, so I'm quite happy just to use it to experiment. But what I wanted to do was to try and tone down some of that colour a little bit. I liked the Sepia, I liked the Aqua, I wasn't keen on the cherry red, albeit it does add something to it. So you'll see here, just going between the Dyke Brown and the Terra Cotta. In fact, I use quite a bit of the Terra Cotta. Now, a lot of the time, you'll see me switching between putting paint on one side, then folding it over, or folding the other side over. The best way to do it, I think, is whatever side you put your paint or your ink on, fold over from the other side. Otherwise you might get some runs. But throughout this you'll see that I swapped about. So now see, nice dendritics there. It's still wet, but I'm going to do a bit more with it. I could have dried it at that point, but I wanted to just kind of spread it out a bit more. And because I'm not watering the ink down, it's going on quite thick here, and a lot of that pattern will stay right away. So I'm looking at this and just saying, well, how can I get more of a shape into it? And you'll see spreading it with the bone folder and with my fingers. Little dot up the top there, you'll see that transfers as well. No, not yet, but I do notice it at some point, and then I think I smoosh it down. Now there, looking at what way I want it up, because that's the other thing, you know, it's because it's not based on something real, you just kind of look at it and think, well, what way would this look best? So I came back to this one and I've decided what I want to do with some is to add some lines, because I think for this one in particular it will just help to bring it together. So I'm using this Stabilo Right for All. Again, I'll put the full name below. What I did discover, I took a little off-cut of the paper, tried it on it, and it will smudge. So what I'm going to do after this is I'll let it dry fully, and then I'll actually treat it with a fixative, and I will do that with all of those that I've created in watercolour as well, because if water was then to touch any of them, they would simply, the watercolours would reactivate. I don't always fix watercolours, sometimes I do, it just depends on the piece that I'm creating, but because this is on glossy paper in particular, I think it will reactivate even more than others. So you'll see that I'm just kind of following the lines there. This is where you realise that both sides are slightly different, but you know, that's okay. If you look at real life butterflies, moths, etc., they're not precise. You know, they look symmetrical in terms of design on each side, but they're not always. So again, put that off to the side. Looking at this one now, this one I had done earlier, and I'm just taking another, I think it's a graphic pen, and just outlining some of this. So I had applied fixative to this already because I knew that with the watercolour, as soon as I added even the pen, it might start to reactivate. So and here just picking up one or two of the details. Now the one that I was working on before that, the ink one, I will come back in at the end of the video to do a little bit more on it, because I'd switched off the camera but decided I still wasn't entirely happy with it, so I go back to it again. This one I do very similar. To be honest, I wish I had left this one, because although some of the others I think benefited from the outlining, I think the colours in this one ended up almost so subtle that by the time I added the lines it kind of took away from it a bit, I think, especially those outer wings. But you know, that kind of thing is down to individual preference. Some people might look at this and say, well, I prefer it with the outlining, and others will prefer it without. And you never know until you've actually done it which way you think is better. So again, as I've said before, experimenting, see what you like best. It does add something to it, and in fact I might go back to this one and add even more detail in future. You know, you could simply do lots of doodles on it, you could Zentangle it, there's lots of different things. But I think what's good about this approach to art is it just kicks things off in your mind. You just see possibilities for other things you can do. So of course Nina will have a video this week, and I will leave a link to that video below. As I said at the start, if you're interested in joining the Mixed Media Emporium, then do click the link below. This was by far my favourite one, the one that I started with. Here were some smaller ones. That one I just put some dots around. These were ATC size. What I would do with these, because I've got the line down the middle, it does kind of compromise the paper a little bit, so I would attach these to another piece of paper just to strengthen them. There's this one. I thought I was done with it. You'll see me saying bye and all that stuff, but I will come back in just a moment because I wanted to do just a little bit more. And here I am with a white paint pen. It just needed some white dots on it. So this will only take a second or two. As always, I do say thank you so much for being here, and I do hope that you will join me again. And as always, take care. We're starting to open up here in Scotland and the UK. Gonna get us one step closer back to normality, but we all need to be careful. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me. Hope you'll join me again next time. I make a little blob here, I'll fix that up a bit, and then I'm gone. So take care, bye for now, see you again.